Welcome to the 2025 Nebula Awards finalists announcement. Please welcome tonight's host, Kate Ristaw, the president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association.
Good evening. As president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, I am proud to welcome you to the announcement of this year's finalists for the 60th Annual Nebula Awards. I invite you to join us as we travel through the fantastic and the familiar, celebrating this year's finalists and their impact on the genre across time and space. I am at home outside Portland, Oregon. As I begin this journey with you, I want to offer gratitude to the land for my opportunity to be here today. I acknowledge my presence on the unceded homelands and waters of the Atfalati Kalapuyans. Today, they are represented by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of the Silets. It is our duty to acknowledge the generational impacts of settler colonialism, forced displacement, and assimilation on Native American families. We recognize these first peoples who coexisted in interdependent and sustainable relationships with the land. They are still here, and they are connected to this place. We honor past, present, and future Indigenous members of our community. Please consider what you can do to acknowledge the realities of Native peoples where you live. Tonight's journey continues with our first category, the Nebula Award finalists for short story.
Why Don't We Just Kill the Kid in the Ominous Hole by Isabel J. Kim. Narrated by Emily Wu Zeller.
So they broke into the hole in the ground, and they killed the kid. And all the lights went out in Ominous. Click, click, click. And the pipes burst, and there was a sewage leak, and the newscaster said there was a typhoon on the way. So they, a different they, these were the they in charge, the they who lived in the nice houses in Ominous. Okay, every house in Ominous was a nice house, but these were nice houses. Got another kid and put it in the hole. And the newscaster said the hurricane had dissipated into a tropical storm, and the pipes were repaired, and the well-paid janitors cleaned up the sewage leak while wearing proper PPE. And the kid in the hole cried and cried and cried. Or they, the general they, the they that meant you and me and the janitors and the newscasters, assumed that the kid was crying, because the hole was soundproofed so nobody could hear the kid, which didn't stop them from knowing about the kid. But it sort of helped.
5 Views of the Planet Tartarus by Rachel K. Jones. Narrated by James Patrick Cronin.
Once a decade, a titanium-nosed shuttle plows through the rings of the planet Tartarus with a new batch of prisoners destined for the Orpheus factory. The debris that makes up the rings is so thick that it thunders like a hailstorm, deafening the passengers. As the orbiting debris bounces and scrapes against the hull, the prisoners squeeze their eyes closed and beg the pilot to be more careful. "Are you trying to hit all of them?" a prisoner snaps, covering his ears against the roaring onslaught. The pilot laughs through her nose, ironic, dismissive. "We always do, as many as we can." She steers into the path of the debris and the thundering increases. Planetside, they hold a farce of a trial in the Sibylline court, a decaying mansion of rotten marble. All traitors to the Sibyllines go to Tartarus to receive the only punishment for rebellion: eternal life. The prisoners stand at attention as the comms read out their names.
We Will Teach You How to Read. We Will Teach You How to Read by Carolyn M. Yoakum. Narrated by Wolf Williams.
Iteration. This is our story, simplified. Life, loss, transformation, love, death. Iteration. The first time you get our message, you only find one thread. It mimics your language in its simplest form. This is a single strand of words laid simplified to end. Life. You will have to work hard if you want to understand us. Transformation. You must learn to hold more than one thread of language simultaneously in your mind. This is our story. Don't worry. We will help you develop the skills you need. Life. We will keep one simple thread unchanged. Transformation. At first, you will glance back and forth between these words iteration and those. This is our Your attention story, is a strange, skittering thing. Life, but we believe you can learn with repetition. Transformation. For you, we are relearning how to teach. Iteration.
The Vampire by P.H. Lee. Narrated by Tori Barron.
It's 2012, and you're 14 years old, and you have strong feelings about Captain America, so of course you're pretending to be a girl on Tumblr. At first, it was just, it was fun to pretend. It was like you weren't some flabby dweeb who can't do a push-up and still wears sweatpants to school. You were a girl. You had opinions on makeup and fashion and boys, particularly, opinions about Steve Rogers, but also boys in general. But now people want to put your pronouns in your header. And if you don't, then you're a transphobe. And it's not like you care about trans people one way or the other. It's not like you've even thought about them ever. But it feels bad to think about it, so anyway, you put she, her, herself in your bio since that's what your mutuals did. Well, except for Jacob Black Railme 420, who's zerself, which is weird, and you don't understand what it means, but somehow it makes you feel safe. And it feels good, actually.
The Witch Trap by Jennifer Hudak. Narrated by Stephanie Willett.
These floors, original to the house, have witnessed the turn of 2 centuries. The shoe concealed beneath them is older. Laces replaced, sole thrice mended, the shoe still bears the impression of the big toe that for years pressed against the worn upper. Now it rests mateless between floor joists, a curiosity for spiders and mice. No longer a shoe, but a summons. The witch smells what has been hidden, leather, dirt, and sweat, and cannot help herself. She makes her way down the chimney, into the walls, beneath the floor, and into the shoe, expecting to find human flesh inside. Once trapped, the witch beats immaterial fists against the inside of the toe box. She wails for the sky, for her horned god, for the crescent moon above. But it's no use. Eventually, she fades. The shoe absorbs the witch, becoming more than what it was. The contractor discovers it when he pries up the floorboards near what used to be the hearth.
Evan, A Remainder by Jordan Corella. Narrated by Vikas Adam. May 2020, and I was spitting out little bits of tooth in the sink. Teeth. Tiny pieces of bone-colored enamel. Initially, I thought it was stress. What with me being newly divorced, newly lonely, newly living out of cardboard boxes in a haunted half-a-duplex. I got 4 pieces of furniture in the divorce. The worst pieces of furniture from a great marriage that ended when my ex-husband told me, "Evan, I love you. You're terrific. But I'm just not gay." All because I told him at Thanksgiving that I'm a man. He sent me a holiday card, a picture of him and his new girlfriend. She's pretty. I didn't send him a holiday card of me and the bloodstain that was on the dining room floor. That would have been weird. Also, I wasn't dating the bloodstain, though I used to spend enough time with it that we might as well have been dating. Christ's sake.
Congratulations to all our short story finalists. Tonight, we have the great privilege of hearing SAG-AFTRA narrators perform the work of our finalists. Their voices bring these worlds of these stories to life. Sometimes we find our way with maps and compasses, and sometimes we follow stories across our own universe, a dimension we have barely begun to comprehend. Listening to them, it may lead us to anger, pain, love, hope. Very often, listening leads us to new understandings. Thank you, SAG-AFTRA. After tonight's event, please look up these narrators, listen to their work, let their voices lead the way. And now, the Nebula Award for Game Writing.
1000 Times Resist by Remy Sue, Pinky Lee, and Connor Wiley. Restore, Reflect, Retry by Natalia Tedoridou. A Death in Hyperspace by Stuart C. Baker, Phoebe Barton, James Beeman, Kate Hartfield, Isabel J. Kim, Sarah S. Messenger, Naka Rat, Natalia Tedoridou, M. Darusha Wem, and Merc Fen Wolfmore. Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree by Hidetaka Miyazaki. The Ghost and the Golem by Benjamin Rosenbaum. Pacific Drive by Karrie Shao and Alexander Dracott. Slay the Princess, The Pristine Cut by Tony Howard Arias and Abby Howard. Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast by Jay Dragon, M. Vaselik, Mercedes Acosta, and Lily J. Harris.
From single player to multiplayer, from phone to console to tabletop and tablet, these games have flung open countless portals of imagination. Congratulations to all of our game writing finalists. The journey continues as we meet our finalists for the Nebula Award for Novelette.
The Brotherhood of Montague Street Video by Thomas Ha, narrated by James Patrick Cronin.
At first I thought something had broken in my book. I didn't notice until the afternoon light from the windows began to recede. I tried to increase the brightness settings of the page, but no matter how I thumbed the margins, they would not change. For the first time, I looked carefully at the gold printing along its spine. The book was dead. What kind of library carried a dead book, I wondered. No one responded to my calls for assistance. There were no working service buttons near the shelves that I could see. I walked downstairs to the circulation desk. No one was present at the self-checkout stalls, and I assumed, like all other recent changes, that this was the result of cuts to the city budget. The more I looked at the gold-laden book, the more I considered it may not have belonged to the library at all. It had no identification tag on the inside cover, no chip at its base.
Another Girl Under the Iron Bell by Angela Liu, narrated by Emily Wu Zeller.
There is no limit to the number of curses in the world. For each one the monks try to exorcise, 10 more take its place. We are not here because we enjoy it, though. Please don't misunderstand. As you dip into steaming bath waters, entwine your bodies under warm sheets, and dream of delicious sake under spring flowers, know that we are always burning. The crows cawed from atop the shingled roof of the outer hall. Wind chilled through the branches of the plum trees. Their early spring buds like tiny eyes. Akechi stood in the garden in front of the temple's wilting tulips and gardenias, a pair of shearing scissors in hand. He frowned when he saw me. I wasn't allowed in the garden, but I'd already memorized the schedule of the others. this was the only time I knew we could be alone. "It's done," I said, tossing him the left hand. Akechi studied the blackening fingers, the flesh half rotted from the journey back.
Joanna's Bodies by Evgenia Triantfilou, narrated by Vikas Adam. The woman whose body Joanna is renting has a nosebleed. Joanna is about to get evicted again, and she's cranky about it. She screams at Eleni in another woman's voice. "Hey, this shit's burning!" Eleni doesn't reply. She's been sitting on the toilet long after she's been done, counting supplies, waiting for Joanna to get bored and go watch TV. There were 10 rolls of toilet paper when they first set up here. Or was it 12? Eleni swears the woman keeps everything in fucking dozens. She must have an obsession or something. 12 tubes of mint-flavored toothpaste, 12 red toothbrushes, 2 used by them. But does a toothbrush count as used by a guest if the mouth it's been brushing is the same as the host's? Does a new soul bring in new mouth germs? 1 toothbrush used by them. By Eleni. "I can't cook like this!" A whiff of burned butter and flour and whatever else Joanna is incinerating out there. Hopefully not the entire place. Loneliness Universe by Evgenia Triantfilou, narrated by Stephanie Willing.
Nefeli paced back and forth the whole 5 steps from one side of the bus stop to the other, sneaking glances at the passers-by while typing furiously on her phone. She was trying to guess which passing woman in her mid-20s Kara had become, rehearsing what she would say once they met face to face. In the one and only blurry picture of her grown-up self Kara had posted on social media, she was a blonde. Kara, a blonde! How times change. 3/4 profile, leaning casually against a wall. But that photo had been over 2 years old, based on the timestamp. She could have looked like anyone now. They had agreed to meet at the bus stop more than 1 hour ago, but they were still working on it. Nefeli. "LOL, nice one, Kara. Now come on, I'm hungry." Kara. "You sure you can't see me? I am sitting right here. Are you even at the right bus stop?"
What Any Dead Thing Wants by Amy Ogden, narrated by Wolf Williams.
The third week of a planetary exorcism is the hardest, at least if the planet in question has megafauna to deal with. Enthusiasm wanes even faster on worlds that never evolved past microbes. Hobbs' crew always comes in like a team of intrepid explorers, swapping stories with the outgoing terraforming crew as they run down the handover checklist. But after 10, 15 days, the work slows down as the crew moves farther from the terraforming origin nexus. That's where the ghosts are densest, the hauntings the most intense. Along the meridian lines that the crew follows around the planet to the secondary terraforming nexus, only the most stubborn haunts linger, the ones that won't clear out at just the first reminder of their own recent mortality. The ones that don't seem to give a shit that Hobb and his crew are working to a strict deadline. Exo-megafauna have, unsurprisingly, absolutely no sense of human decency.
Katya Vasilyevna and the Second Drowning of Babarechka by Christine Hanelsey, narrated by Tori Barron.
Once, in a certain kingdom at a certain time, a river flowed under a bridge. It flowed under a bridge and past a willow tree, and in that willow tree dwelled the spirit of a girl who had drowned. I dwelt in that willow tree, and I was content. O you river, my little river, O you swift little river of mine, you flow, little river, without rippling, without overflowing your steep banks, without overflowing your steep banks, without disturbing the yellow sand. Oh, you river, my little river, oh, you swift little river of mine. I watched her from the river's edge. She was sturdily built, Katya Vasilyevna, her skin ruddy and sun-kissed, her hips broad. She walked with a purpose that drew the eye. She lived at the big house up on the hill, the house I could only glimpse in winter, a flash of color against the stark silhouettes of grasping branches.
Negative Scholarship on the Fifth State of Being by A.W. Prihandita, narrated by Tori Barron.
Doc, there's a hole growing in me, the alien said through the spherical interpreting machine hovering over them. Samau barely registered the word hole, so taken was she by the sight of the alien. If she were just a tad less caring about propriety, she would have let her eyes blow wide open. The alien looked impossibly transparent, yet not transparent at the same time, like a mound of water. Their shape was almost humanoid, a roundish head sitting atop a misshapen lump of torso. They were visible in the way ocean waves were visible, only through folds that magnified its translucence to almost opaqueness. Samau glanced again at the patient form. Name, Tixizna. He, him. Species, Plismorinox matori. Samau had never heard of the Plismorinox before, and a quick look-up in the Brazos database of interstellar species told her this wasn't her fault. The Plismorinox had an occurrence rate of 0.0000013% of interspecies encounters, which made her impulsively count the decimal places. She'd never seen anything that small.
Congratulations to all our Novelette finalists. You know, some maps serve as visual guides. These stories, they came to us on screens, opening up our eyes to worlds beyond our experience, and also devastatingly familiar. So, let's meet the finalists for the Ray Bradbury Nebula Award for Outstanding Dramatic Presentation.
I Saw the TV Glow by Jane Schonbrun. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 by Mike McMahon. Dune Part 2 by John Spates and Denis Villeneuve. Chaos by Charlie Covell and Georgia Christou. Wicked by Winnie Holzman and Dana Fox. Doctor Who Dot and Bubble by Russell T. Davies.
Congratulations to all of our Bradbury finalists. We are so excited to celebrate your work at the Nebula Awards ceremony. And now, you know what? Let's check this map for the next stage of our quest. Here are the finalists for the Nebula Award for Novella.
The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Muhammad, narrated by Vikas Adam. It was not yet dawn when they came for her. Varys stumbled from her bed into an early morning sea, deep blue light submerging the little house with no hint of sun. She swam, it seemed, to the lamp in the hall and lit it with a wavery, half-smothered match. She swam down the stairs. The front door rattled in its frame with each blow, paint and shreds of wood flaking from it, as if the unseen callers were not knocking, but rushing at it with a battering ram. It was locked from the inside, but the bolts and bars were beginning to give as she approached. She unlocked it hastily, cursing and fumbling the ancient keys, and threw it wide. "This the residence of Varys Thorn?" The man on the doorstep still raised his gauntleted fist, as if, the door now conquered, he would hammer her as well for a wrong or slothful answer. "I am she." "Then get in." The Dragonfly Gambit by A.D. Sway, narrated by Tori Barron.
Prologue. If you're listening to this, then we have arrived at our ends. We kept our promises as women of our Constitution should. I have ended the 20-year-long uprising against the rule in just 6 months, just as you've asked of me, and you, the third daughter of the rule, eternal, rightful, both beautiful and deadly, have ended me. Regrettably, this means I wasn't there to witness the instance when your facade came down, when all control seeped through your fingers. Alas, we were never meant to live in the future we were carving from the decaying carcass of your empire. Now you can rest. We can both rest. We did the best with what we had. 1. By all accounts, I should be scared. Intelligence and investigations boys are overzealous. They like to break things, doors, people, entire local governments if they get the chance. 5 more flights of stairs until they're at my door.
Countess by Susan Palumbo, narrated by Emily Wu Zeller.
Acting Captain Verika Samaru abandoned her seat and stood ramrod stiff behind the Oestra's navigator after it jolted through the Invictan region skip gate. Invicta, the ruby and sapphire-hued capital planet of the Ersabad Empire floating in the ink void of space before them, had always compelled her to her feet, even as a hollow-cheeked child staring out of the porthole of the immigrant ship Zerak 2 decades earlier. Her heart lifted like a balloon filled with hope as she watched her naturalized home grow larger on the screen. She resisted the urge to place her right hand on her chest in homage. Instead, she held her chin high and kept her face as implacable as ice. "Success or perish," she repeated inwardly. The mantra had been a touchstone, a beacon throughout her darkest Merchant Fleet Academy days. It had spurred her onward in spite of exhaustion, loneliness, and the whispered slurs hurled at her by her fellow recruits denigrating her brown skin and Exterran Antillean heritage. She'd survived the academy, and she would see the Oestra's mission through now.
The Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain by Sophia Samatar, narrated by James Patrick Cronin.
The boy was taken upstairs without warning, unprotesting as he had been through all the changes in his 17 years, the shifts from cell to cell each time he outgrew the bolt on his ankle and the doctor came to exchange it for a larger one, an operation performed with a tool the hold people called the mallet, which jarred the whole leg and sometimes made the blood spray from the ankle bone and caused a sense of queasiness and superstitious awe in the boy, who would glimpse, for the instant during which the bolt and chain were removed, the shiny and alien-looking patch of underexposed skin on his leg, which, according to the prophet, housed the seed of the soul.
The Tusks of Extinction by Ray Naylor, narrated by Stephanie Willing.
Demira followed the blood down the hill. The ground here was soft with upwelling water. Rivulets reflected the sun through blades of grass. Her feet sank a few centimeters into the upper layer of soil before meeting the spongy mat of root web. She could not see much blood, but the pathway of blood scent was clear. Touching her trunk to the Jacobson's organ in the roof of her mouth conjured the mammoth she called Koyon. His shy, lumbering form, his tattered right ear, his mournful, hairy head. Koyon's eyes were amber, not the dark earthen color of most of the others. Beautiful eyes, long-lashed and soulful. Demira remembered when the herd drove him off 2 summers ago. For weeks he had trailed them at a distance, trumpeting desperately when any of them turned to look at him, winding his trunk through the scent path of mother and kin. She had not seen when he finally turned and went away.
Lost Ark Dreaming by Suyi Davies Okungbowa, narrated by Wolf Williams.
Yekini had one dream, and the ark was always in it. She had never been religious, not in the old ways before the deluge, not in the new way of the master clerics, and not in the way of those who secretly tended to bygone spiritualities. Yekini should never have even known the tale of the ark and the flood, but somewhere between tower-wide broadcasts regaling denizens with sermons about the fulfillment of the second deluge, and Mame, who was intentionally spiritual and knew too many tales from above and under the sea, learning about it was inevitable. The dream was always the same. The ark's keeper stood at the bow in a flowing robe, reaching out, asking Yekini to hand over the basket. Sometimes it was Olokun who stood there, stretching forth a tentacle. Sometimes it was Noah, with a bushy beard and a tight squint, crow's feet at the edge of his eyes.
Congratulations to all our novella finalists. Stories written for middle grade and young adult, they take us to the crossroads of discovery and invite us into the power, fun, and complications of choosing a direction. We're past the age of simple morals and perfect compasses, but these stories show us that we're not alone on the journey. There's hope and healing ahead, as well as found family and more than a few friends. They may be traveling with us from the underworld. Get ready. We are pleased to announce the finalists for the Andre Norton Nebula Award for middle grade and young adult fiction.
Benny Ramirez and the Nearly Departed by Jose Pablo Iriarte, narrated by Wolf Williams.
Prologue. Ignacio Ramirez would never describe himself as a great artist. He was far too humble for that. He was the humblest artist he knew, and he knew many, being a famous musician himself. Anybody who came into Ignacio's living room, where he now stood with his trumpet, working on his soon-to-be amazing comeback song, would soon know how great he was. They would know from the gold record on the walls, from the Latin Grammy on the mantle for his big hit, Miami Maravilloso, and from the photographs of his glory days with anybody who was anybody and El Negocio. Ignacio Ramirez didn't need to tell anyone what a great artist he was, because his walls would do it for him. And once he figured out how to end this new song, his music would remind the world that he was numero uno. Ignacio lifted his trumpet to his lips and played the beginning notes of his comeback composition.
Puzzle Heart by Jen Reese. Narrated by Vikas Adam. On the way to Eklund's puzzle house, it started to snow. Not a timid, fluffy snow with flakes content to drift to the ground and sink slowly into the earth. No. This snow fell with a driving need. It hurtled down from the sky, so hungry, intent on gobbling up everything. By the time Dad turned their hatchback onto the long, lonely road up the mountain and into the deepest part of the forest, 6 inches of the stuff blanketed the trees and street signs and roads, and the snow wasn't even close to done. Perigee sat in the passenger seat and tried not to explode into a million fidgety pieces. Usually they let their excitement, "Road trip, Grandma!" and nervousness, "Surprise awful snowstorm in March!" bubble out of their mouth. But Dad had been white-knuckling the steering wheel for miles. The last thing he needed was Perigee's worries piled on top of his own. Daydreamer by Rob Cameron. Narrated by Wolf Williams.
I know what's real and what's made up. What's real is me sitting in the main office waiting for the principal in this uneven chair that's got Lego stuffed under the cushion and teeter-totters if I breathe too fast. Almost messed up the drawing I'm doing on the back of my social studies test. What's real is I'm in bad trouble. About 15 minutes ago, I was in class taking a test. My teacher, Mr. Sargent, knows I'm bad at tests, but he makes me take them anyway. Kimaya sometimes lets me copy off hers, except Mr. Sargent made us sit in alphabetical order today because he said that's how they do it in the real world. I was alone with the words, but I wasn't crying. That's not why my eyes were wet. It was because I had to read about Black history on glaring, angry white pages, boiling the words alive.
Moonstorm by Yoon-Ha Lee. Narrated by Emily Wu Zeller.
Huayang, then called Huajin, was 10 years old when her world, quite literally, fell apart. It wasn't a world, technically, but a clanner moon called carnelian for the red hue of its soil. Like all the moons and moonlets in the moonstorm, it had an erratic orbit. Unfortunately, this month its path had taken it close to the border of the Empire of New Chosan, which left the adults of Huajin's household arguing over whether they needed to evacuate and shelter from Imperial attackers. Mother Era glowered at eldest Paik, who stood blocking the door. "You're wasting time," she said. "The sooner we get out of here, the safer we'll be. I was just on the comms with the lookout tower. The Imperials are sending a real fleet for once, not a detachment of raiders." "It's just another false alarm," eldest Paik said. Z had unusual light eyes, almost amber, which shone against Zertani skin and black hair, shared by most clanners.
The Young Necromancer's Guide to Ghosts by Vanessa Ricci Toad. Narrated by Tori Barron.
Lucy could talk to dead people, and no one but her sister Marcy believed her. Lucy didn't want to talk to dead people, and she really wished they'd stop talking to her. But there wasn't anything she could do about it. She wished she could do something about it, especially right now, because the ghost of this lost girl was trailing along behind her, and she kept forgetting which supplies she was supposed to be picking up. She didn't have time to be distracted by ghosts. If she took much longer in getting back to Marcy, the caravan would leave without them both. And then Uncle might find them. Lucy shivered and glanced over her shoulder at the center of the market square, like she expected to see Uncle storming her way. But instead, It was just the transparent face of the ghost girl leaning eagerly toward her, with the strange gray sheen of the dead.
Braided by Leah Sipus. Narrated by Stephanie Willing.
Prologue. On the day my long-lost sister came home, I cut off my hair. I had always wanted to cut my hair. Strands of it were constantly tickling my face, blocking my view, and getting into my soup. It was so silky that it wouldn't stay secure in any hairstyle. It was so long that it took 2 maids at least an hour to braid it, and sometimes much longer, depending on how elaborate and powerful a hairstyle they were working on. The magic in it could be uncomfortable at times, especially when the mage insisted that we try one of her new spell combinations. And it was a constant reminder of my grand and noble destiny as the future queen of the borderland. A destiny that should have belonged to my sister. I had suggested cutting it only once before, when I was too young to really understand why my hair was so important.
Congratulations to all the finalists for the Andre Norton Nebula Award for middle grade and young adult fiction. We'd like to say thank you once again to our SAG-AFTRA readers. Your voices ushered us powerfully to the thresholds of so many new worlds. And now, we have reached our final category. Alas. Final category. Here are the finalists for the Nebula Award for Novel.
Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell. Narrated by Tori Barron.
Each year, when Shisheshin hibernated, she dreamed of her childhood nest. Oh, the warmth of it. A warmth unlike anything in the adult world. Soft and pliable heat keeping her and her siblings alive. In that warmth, they were fed raw life. Her father's ribs, rich in marrow, cracking delicately in their mouths, and providing the first feast of their lives. His fat deposits were generous, and his entrails sheltered them from the cruel winter elements. If Shisheshin could have spent her entire life inside the nest of his remains, she would have. But all childhoods end. Hers ended when one of her sisters bit off Shisheshin's left heel. Her siblings matured too quickly and hungered for more than their father. Shisheshin had to defend herself using jagged fragments of their father's pelvis, his final and most gracious gift. The assault was a gift from her siblings, too, for she spent a week dining on their savory carcasses.
The Book of Love by Kelly Link. Narrated by Wolf Williams.
A girl wakes up in her sister's bed. "Laura?" she says. No one answers. Oh, she shouldn't be here. The one who should be here isn't. The girl's name is Susanna. She is too tall, lamentably tall, and she has bad dreams. Shouldn't her dreams be comforting, restorative? Shouldn't she see the ones she longs with all her heart to see? But in her dreams, too, they are inexplicably missing. The sheets are half off the bed, as if someone has been yanking them. It isn't morning yet. It's the middle of the night. Everything is in the wrong place, except it isn't. Her mother, Ruth, isn't home yet. All those NICU babies with their complicated medical needs, their rashy bottoms and feeding tubes, suffused in ultraviolet light, parents slumped in blistered naugahyde recliners, nurses murmuring in corners about the bid to unionize, about husbands and television shows and their own children. Do they fall silent when Susanna's mother comes close?
A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. Narrated by Stephanie Willing.
There was a fly walking on Cordelia's hand, and she was not allowed to flick it away. She had grown used to the ache of sitting on a hard wooden pew and being unable to shift her weight. It still hurt, but eventually her legs went to sleep and the ache became a dull, all-over redness that was easier to ignore. Though her senses were dulled in obedience, her sense of touch stayed the strongest. Even when she was so far under that the world had a gray film around the edges, she could still feel her clothing and the touch of her mother's hand. And now the fly's feet itched, which was bad, then tickled, which was worse. At the front of the church, the preacher was droning on. Cordelia had long since lost the thread. Lust and tithing were his two favorite topics. Probably it was one of those. Her mother took her to church every Sunday, and Cordelia was fairly certain that he had been preaching the same half-dozen sermons for the past year.
Sleeping Worlds Have No Memory by Yaroslav Barsukov. Narrated by James Patrick Cronin.
Shay Ashcroft stepped from a carriage into the low-lit alley as a mongrel lifted its door knocker of a head from a garbage pile. Dogs. They'd taken over the capital a week before. The wind dragged garlands of crushed glass and everyday commodities across the pavement, and the dogs picked out anything they could chew. Meat from the decimated butcher's shops, greens, someone's shoes. Those animals had guts. It was the humans who tended to stay indoors, half of them cursing the one person who'd had the chance to stop the violence in its infancy. Him. 3 people at the royal court he'd previously considered friends had already advised him to issue an apology. He told them to go to hell. The hound ran into the middle of the street where it barked and leaped in place, snapping its jaws at something it couldn't quite reach. "Attaboy," Shay said. "Though that bone's a bit too big for you."
Asunder by Kirsten Hall. Narrated by Emily Wu Zeller.
The shore. Black sand as fine as powder. The slick gleam of washed-up kelp. Over the restless gray waters, rain clouds loomed low and heavy. A lot of people died here, thought Karrie. The sea breeze ruffled her dark hair, and she drew her coat tighter. Died violently. Karan Oslaw was watching her, his hands buried deep in his pockets. His jaw worked languidly as he rolled Osk around in his mouth. He had been chewing the resin's stimulant since they left Psychomet, and the crunching had frayed Karrie's nerves to their breaking point. He noticed her scowl and raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said. In all honesty, Karrie had wanted to refuse the job. She had wanted, and still wanted very much, to tell Oslaw to take a hike into the sea. But that risked offending Mariska. And people who pissed off the second mayor usually found themselves floating face down out on the honey reef. Besides, the money was good. She couldn't deny that. "It was here," she replied. "Something happened near the beach. Something bloody. Probably within the last 3 days.
Rake's Fall by Vajra Chandrasekhara. Narrated by Vikas Adam. Season 1, Episode 1. Minute 31 and 35 seconds. Leverett chases Annalid into the jungle. They are laughing because they're teenagers playing a game. The jungle is not quite a jungle. In a much later episode, we learn via a minor subplot about 1970s land reform that it was once a colonial-era rubber plantation, abandoned and gone feral. It will gradually grow wilder and more overgrown through the seasons. We know another year has passed when the New Year birds hoot in the background. Leverett and Annalid will grow older, too. This is that kind of show. There are only two kinds of show. The kind where people grow older, and the kind where they don't. We, the fandom, love the first kind best. We love this show so much. Leverett and Annalid aren't their real names. That is, not the given names of the characters in the show, which we never learn, but nicknames they took from old textbooks they found gathering dust in a cupboard in their little school that never seems to hold exams or parent-teacher conferences. There are no ordinary school lessons. All they do at school is sit in a darkened classroom with the other kids, watching a show about us on TV.
Congratulations to all the finalists in the novel category. Thank you. Thank you for traveling with us through these worlds of words and time. And thank you to all of the SFWA members who voted this year, and to our community of volunteers who made this evening possible. For all of us readers, players, and audience members, the journey has just begun. Head over to your favorite indie bookstore or library. So much power and possibility awaits. Congratulations again to all our finalists. We are honored to celebrate with you this summer at the 60th Annual Nebula Awards Conference and Ceremony, June 5th through 9th in Kansas City, Missouri. You can find out more at events.sfwa.org. We'll see you on June 7th at 8 p.m. Central Time, online and in person. Where will the ceremony take us? What wonders await? Join us this June. We'll find out together.